Welcome to Voyage of the Geek for another week. Joining me always, Stan Miller, Tom McGill.
Hello.
I'm Dave Scotland on this 22nd of March, 2018. And I'm going to let our formally dressed member announce the film that we're going to have a look at tonight because I think we're a little bit underdressed for such an honour. Dan.
Yeah, a little bit embarrassed, actually.
I tried to dress like a 1951 gentleman. Explorer, no, not explorer, engineer who builds spaceships.
Architect.
White shirt, suspenders, or braces as they might. No, braces is British, isn't it?
No,
what do the Americans call them?
Yeah,
suspenders.
There's a period,
suspenders,
early last century, even the poorest person used to get around quite well dressed, at least had one suit in there.
By today's standards, they're
I mean, there were no
awesome.
T-shirts back in those days. They
No,
weren't
that's
even
right.
invented.
That's right. You did have wife beater singlets.
Yeah.
You had a white shirt, a thin tie, suspenders. Usually you could
Some
tell
leather shoes.
affluence by the shoe leather.
Yeah.
Cufflinks,
Yes.
probably as well.
And a jacket.
And they literally lived in the one suit, didn't they? They
No, I'm
sort
sure
of
they
didn't have a lot of... I'm talking about the average punter.
Yes, I think so.
Maybe one bath a week and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And doing the lawn in your suit.
And they'd go and work all day in the suit.
Yeah.
And then come
Home.
brush the dust off it. So, yes, Tom, what is the name of the film that we're going to have a look at
It
tonight?
is a classic, the well-known film Flight to Mars.
Well known by 15 people around the world.
It's
Soon to be 16.
Yeah, 16.
1951, I believe, is the year.
1951.
1951. And it's...
To put it into perspective, I think 4 or 5 years before Robbie the Robot. Before
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Forbidden Planet.
Forbidden Planet.
Yes.
Which we have given glowing feedback.
And fantastic special effects for the time. So
absolutely.
we can parallel compare these two films because, but Robbie the Robot wasn't too far behind this one.
We did a show on Forbidden Planet with Tony Oakton, I believe, was on board that night.
Maybe.
And it was one of our better shows because it was one of the better movies that we've looked at from that. And there's so much to talk about in that
classic.
film. And the big test for tonight is there as much to talk about with this film. So let's obviously my normal question, which was you've probably seen it before, and then there was a gap of time.
When,
and then,
when did you first...
when did you first see this film?
Last
Dan.
week. Oh, Dan, sorry.
about last week. And the first time I ever heard of it was 2 days before that.
Tom?
We felt like doing a 1950s film.
Yeah.
And there can be gold in there. In them there are films.
I
But
believe
no,
there's-
I found it. I was the one who put it on the list of films to on our suggestion
I found it on the list.
that we had,
Yeah.
and
So I'm
I've
not totally
been
to blame.
racking my head as to why I picked it because I came across it doing some IMDb surfing and found it worthwhile. I'm sure I heard about it at some documentary that I watched, but I
Yeah.
can't remember anymore exactly.
I think it's a good choice. It's got some fodder there. There's some primitive visual effects in it. There's some technical stuff that they've had a fair crack at, even insofar as the outfits and things like that. And spoilers, there will be spoilers in general. We're going to spoil the whole film for you, but we will be talking about maybe what could be the potential birthplace of the Teletubbies was in this particular film. I can't tell you how hard I laughed. This is obviously Flight to Mars when the Martians came around the corner.
Not as hard as I laughed when the spaceship crash landed on Mars.
All right.
And he accelerated into the mountain.
I have rarely cracked up, but we'll get to that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, I was the same. 2 days before I'd watched it, was the first I'd heard about it, which was on our list. We have sort of a go-to list of movies that we are interested in having a look at. And as is our wont, we wanted to go back and have a look at something from the golden era of sci-fi, which is that anywhere between the sort of the late 40s all the way through to the early 60s, I believe, where we saw a lot of UFOs, saucer movies.
And things that are atomic.
And science everywhere, or at least that's what they called it
Yeah,
at the time.
atomic monsters and atomic rockets.
That's it, because the science that was sort of dripping into the culture at the time was atomic. It was, there was a lot of warfare mixed in with sci-fi as well. And it's interesting to see where sci-fi came from. It helps you appreciate where it's come to, I guess.
Another thing is that this is 1951, so this is only 6 years after World War II's finished.
Yeah.
So I don't know all, but at least some of these actors are in the war. They're like Steve, what's his name here? Whatever his name is, I don't know. What's Steve's name?
Steve the Horn Dog.
Steve the Horn Dog.
Oh,
Yeah,
Steve the journo.
Cameron Mitchell, I think it's like bomber pilot or a bomber. Yeah. So anyway,
Well, so are a lot of the props.
that's what I'm kind of
and
saying is
costumes.
that
Yeah.
there's lots of this leftover Second World War stuff. People who were in it, people who were organising it, bits and pieces of technology and things, and costumes. Like they're wearing bomber jackets here, right?
Yeah.
They're wearing flight gear from like World War II.
Yep.
So yeah, that flavours it a lot. Yeah, and so a lot of army stuff and general this and Air Marshal what's his face.
You got the sense it was a military expedition, really, from the very outset of the film. The communique goes out on the live wire from the Pentagon, and they make a point that it's the most top secret thing we've ever had to send.
And we've sent a few.
How do you rate secrets? That's more secret than that secret. It's all secret. So let's dive right into it. Normally, what we do is have a look at the narrative for the film, and we sort of go by the beats of the story as the film unfolds, and we stop off along the way talking about things that interest us and things that stand out to us. And Dan drives the bus as far as narrative through the process, and takes the time to document the story beats to make sure that we get to the other end alive.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we start with this one, Dan?
We start at the beginning, where there's a bit of a character introduction thing going on, which is a pretty good way to start a story, I guess. So they start with, my story beat here is Steve and the General. So we've got...
There was a little scene before that.
What was that scene?
The telescope.
Oh, that's right.
Guy sitting in the recliner.
They have like a preface.
Yeah,
Preface.
yeah.
Preface.
And it's a guy pondering, standing behind a guy that's fully reclined, staring up a telescope, and looking at Mars.
Yes, just wondering about things.
Pondering and contemplating.
Yes.
And wondering if we'll ever have a telescope powerful enough to see it.
Yeah.
To see the civilizations.
To see the
on Mars.
civilizations
Yeah.
that might exist on Mars.
Yeah, so there's a scientist. So were they either of those two characters actually in the film?
Couldn't tell. They're too.
I don't think so.
Too small. I thought maybe it's
Yeah.
Dr. Lane, who is the project leader, but I couldn't tell.
And it was very uniquely shot. It was shot against a really bright background, and they were sort of heavily silhouetted. It almost felt artsy.
They have those
and-
pastel colours.
Yeah.
They have purples and blues and
Yeah.
stuff.
I will assume that when they make a film and they already have actors on hand, that they're not going to get another guy dressed up in a suit to act as the professor looking through a telescope. So I would assume, not knowing, that they were characters from the film.
It's not the highest budget thing in the world either. So yeah, no, that's interesting. It's an interesting story point as well. To do. It's like a preface. I mean, it's not actually part of the story at all. It's not part of the film. It's just a little intro, get you in the mood
There's
thing
something
that they
about it.
stick at the front.
There's a flavour
Yeah, the flavour.
It adds a flavour that is really common for films of that era, where if the story is about Martians, if the story is about space travel or whatever, there seems to be some kind of pre-credit sort of discussion or narrative, narration that goes over the top, and it's about will we, blah, 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 or have they, or do they, or will we need to, and then the story starts. And so it started with almost like a question, and it sets up the premise, and which you quickly forget. I forgot when the Teletubbies do come around the corner, which we'll discuss in a little while. I'd forgotten all about the fact that there's likely going to be people on Mars. I forgot all about it, which is what that first scene really.
That was setting up that question.
Setting it up.
All right, so there's General What's-His-Face wandering through the very busy Pentagon, and he comes into a room. There's two people in the room. One of them is a reporter.
Yes.
And that's Steve.
And the reporter is sitting in the general's chair.
True, he is sitting in the general's
and
chair.
Nobody minds?
Yep.
Nobody minds.
It's played by Cameron Mitchell, a heavy TV actor who has, man, have you seen his bio?
What are some of the things?
He was in film, he was in film and television all the way up to 2018.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right.
So he's still kicking. His career started, and I'm going way back, and I'm rolling all the way down to 1945.
So in the first 6 years of his career, until he did Flight to Mars, how many movies had he made by this time?
It looks like at least a dozen. Smuggler's Gold, Stars Over Hollywood, Command Decision, Adventures of Gallant Bess, Leather Gloves, all of those sort of swashbuckling and also military
cowboy
type.
movies.
Yeah, cowboy movies, swashbucklers, like pirates and musketeers and things like that. But it wasn't until he got to sort of the 70s, I'd say, he became just a stalwart TV actor. He was in multiple episodes of Rockford Files and Knight Rider, and he was just a bit player.
Yeah.
He's more than a bit player. He was often the nemesis or the guy that needed help because his family's getting picked on by the gang or something. But yeah, he was in Bonanza, a couple of episodes of Bonanza. He was just a stalwart TV actor. But it was interesting to see him at such a young age.
It says here, prior to World War II, he was a Air Force bombardier.
Right, cool.
And so, soon as finishes World War II, as soon as he finishes there, he goes straight into acting and spends the rest of his career doing that. All right, so we find out he's going to be the reporter who's going to go on this spaceship.
He died in 94, so he wasn't working until 2018.
Oh, you might have saw 1918. He was born in 1918.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
And then there's another person there, which is Dr. Lane, who is a big science boffin and the designer of the rocket, or the
head of the project.
Head of the project. That's right.
Yep. And you take when you do your first venture outside. Now, the humans have not flown to the moon or anything, right? This is the first.
They're going straight to Mars.
This is the first rocket that humanity has built.
It's
right?
all about rocket power is the big catch buzz that they're all unsure of whether they're going to explode or get where they.
There's no test flights. There's no Mercury program or anything.
Yep.
You build a rocket. You put people in. You take a reporter with you because we're going up. We're going exploring.
Yep.
And that kind of mentality is, I think, the explorer mentality is humans have boats and explore, right? We go on the ship and we'll go over the horizon and see what's there. The reason you do that is because you're very familiar with your ship.
Yeah.
You've been sailing for thousands of years. Yeah. And it's just a matter of, let's take a crew, let's take some people, we know what we're doing, let's go see what's out there. And they transfer, all these old science fiction movies do that. They transfer that mentality into an outer space thing. We'll just build a rocket, and we'll just get the children and the dog and some lunch, and we'll fly to Mars. Oh, we'll see what happens. That's because we don't know if we'll return.
They even have a conversation in the first 5 minutes of the film about, the great mountaineers go to the top of the mountain without ever thinking about how to come down. But it doesn't matter. We've got to go anyway.
I think the general says to him, "Aren't you worried about getting back?"
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised about the rather blasé attitude. Actually, on this, nobody has plans for how they're going to get back.
Even when they're on
Yeah.
the thing, even
Yeah.
when they push the launch button, they still
They
don't
do
know
not have
how
any
they're
plan.
getting
Well,
back.
even the old guy who signs up, Professor Jackson says, I do this interview, I get $3,000 for my wife and children. She's ailing wife, and
He's
she
already in
needs
the
to be
grave.
looked
Yeah,
after.
yeah, probably all gonna die.
This is I'm never gonna come back.
Yeah.
And the analogy that he's using is, when Steve comes in, Steve says, for some reason after the Dr. Lane explains that, he hasn't got any plans of how they're going to get back.
Yeah.
Then Steve comes over and says, Doctor, I once knew a guy who climbed a mountain and couldn't get down, and he died on that mountain. And what's the good doctor's response?
Well, it's important. The important thing is that he got to the top.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's the important thing,
what-
Steve, that he got to the top of the mountain.
Yeah. No.
And then they ask him the question is to the reporter. They say, "How are you going to report this back?"
Yeah.
And I'm thinking in my mind, this is 1950 radio,
Yeah.
and he goes, "Well, we have these messages in a bottle that
No,
we
no,
throw-
no. There's space cylinders.
That's right.
space messages in a bottle, which we throw out. They have homing beacons, and they come back and they land in Washington, I think, or somewhere. They can't land with the Ruskies, so they have homing beacons that take them back over American soil. And
I think he uses a combo though. He says we'll use radio until it runs out, and then we'll send.
they don't mention radio at this point
Oh,
because
no, they don't.
I'm
They
thinking radio. They say we're using these homing cylinders.
That's right.
And then they crossfade, and the very next thing they show us is a close-up of a radio
Yeah.
where a broadcast is done. I'm
That's
thinking, radio! It's right there in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, if you want to get technical, and I don't want to, well, I'm going to spoil a little bit, but we're going to spoil everything anyway. They fly off, and then after a while, they get out of radio range.
Yep.
Yeah, but then they land on Mars.
And the Mars guys have been listening to the radio from the humans all the time.
And know all about their trip.
Have learned the language because that's what you do.
Yep.
It's pretty boring on Mars, I guess. But the dishwashers work by themselves.
Yep.
All right, so Steve is the reporter.
Yep.
And so he's going to go off and do reporting things like a reporter should.
He's a former war reporter.
That's right. And he's got a lot of cred. That's why he's on this suicide mission that nobody knows how they're going to get back home after they go.
Yep.
And so he goes over to meet another one of the guys, the chief engineer,
Jim.
Who seems to be the brains of the outfit, and that becomes even more known when we get to Mars.
smoking an awesome pipe.
Yes.
Wish I had
Yeah.
that.
And the writer Steve, in that first meeting, or I don't think it's his first meeting, they seemed a bit familiar.
Yeah. He holds it like
Steve gets his angle for the
his human interest story.
human interest angle, and it's all
Yes.
about the engineer. And the engineer's name again? Sorry, is it
Jim Baker.
Jim Baker.
Barker.
Yeah. Well,
And-
Barker. Sorry. Yeah.
And,
Barker.
and Jim is the dedicated scientist who has the
He's the one
skylight
in
in his room, and
The white shirt and the suspenders and the
That's
tie and the pipe in his mouth and
That's
the
right.
well-shaved
He's a
chin.
1950s nerd.
that's right.
Yep,
He's
yep,
married
yep.
to science.
Yeah, but he's still cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still cool. He probably
And
has
they-
martinis with the guys on Saturday nights and plays poker or something or other.
Yep.
Anyway, there's a knock at the door,
Mm-hmm.
and in comes Carol.
Virginia Houston, I think.
Carol Stafford, played by Virginia Houston.
Okay, and so what's her deal?
Wet blanket.
She is bad-tempered.
Yes, she's
She
in
wants
the
she's
to be
cranky.
surly.
On the eve of going to space.
yeah,
She's cranky because he stood her up.
yeah. They're supposed to be going out on a date, and he hasn't got his shit
This is
together.
Jim stood her up.
Yeah,
Yeah, her
Jim's
boyfriend.
been
But she hasn't met Steve before.
lazing around talking with his mates, and hasn't got his kit on.
And he completely forgot. And
Completely
she's been
forgot.
sitting in some restaurant somewhere waiting
Yeah.
for Jim.
So she's quite surly.
And Steve, the horn dog reporter, immediately sees her and
Yep.
Googles her up and down and
Yep.
starts salivating and makes a move.
Yep.
Right there and then.
There's no boundaries in this era of film. We learnt that in Forbidden Planet, where the crew made it known. Whereas this one particular member of the crew was almost physically undressing the actress in the piece. Whereas in this scenario, Steve, the writer, the journalist, very quickly recognises her feminine wiles.
Oh, he says that, doesn't he? You're very feminine.
No, he says that later, but
that
yes,
later, yeah.
that is one of his classy
So
lines.
feminine.
Yes. I like your feminine.
Yes, he takes on a creepy bent.
It's very rapey, that guy.
Yes,
Immediately.
Yes.
He is very rapey, even to the point where when they do finally get to Mars, which we'll obviously get to,
No, but
he loses the plot completely and just becomes Dr. Rapey and only has eyes for her and her situation and her. I don't see him doing anything else. Walks around with a pencil and talks to her a lot.
well, as we'll see, their relationship develops, and I think it takes two to tango.
Right.
Shall we say?
Yes.
Remember, she is a surly, stroppy, annoying.
Yes. So why is she going on the
Chick.
trip?
Because she's some sort of secondary backup engineer.
She's a smart broad.
She's a smart
as
dame.
That's what Jim sort of points out.
Yes, she's a smart dame because she's been watching Jim do his thing for weeks.
That's right. And she has contributed to the process.
And
shall we
later
say.
on, she will whip out a slide rule and do some calculations like you wouldn't believe.
Yep.
He's also in charge of turning on the emergency lights.
Yes, lights on. All right, then. So we then move off after that to the next member of the crew.
We're in Steve's apartment.
We're in Steve's apartment.
There's a knock on the
Yep.
door.
And it's Professor William Jackson.
That's right. And he announces, after a quick introduction, he announces, I've got to go. I'm due to be on television, being interviewed on television. At which point Steve does what?
Steve gets the
He
shits.
puts the mockers on it.
Yeah, he says,
completely.
well, I'm going to call up the TV station
It
and
hasn't
have them
been
shut
sanctioned.
it down.
Has not been sanctioned.
Yes.
Everything's supposed to come through me.
Yes, I'm going to call
Somehow a journalist in 1951 has a lot of pull in the military.
He was sitting in a general seat earlier on in the day in the Pentagon. So he's going to call somebody on the phone. I never
That's
quite
right.
understand who, but
I
somebody's going
I
to...
think he called the professor, the guy in charge, the old boy that goes up.
Dr. Lane.
Dr. Lane.
Oh, okay.
And then while he's on hold waiting for Dr. Lane to get on the phone, the guy that, what's his name? The guy,
Jackson, Professor Jackson.
Jackson, who was due to go on television, explains the reason.
Yes, he moans.
He moans.
He's a morose old guy.
Oh, I don't. I was going to go on telly.
Yeah, he wants money.
He's going to give me money.
Do you know how much science pays?
Yeah.
Nothing.
I haven't got any money.
Why did you science to
I'm
become
really
rich?
sad.
Hey, I'm trying to decipher the play, right? I'm trying to decipher what is the story going to be. You're setting up characters. You're giving them motivation. You're giving them a backstory. So when I see this morose old guy who has nothing to lose, they're making it very clear I have no one in the world. I'm not coming back. Here's some money for my ailing wife. I'm thinking, okay, he's gonna die.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm saying he's dead. He's a throwaway.
He's crewman number 3.
He is potentially, because he wants money, he's potentially a spy.
Yes.
He might be working for the Ruskies.
Yes.
So that's where I'm
Gonna
thinking.
sabotage.
I'm also thinking that Horny Steve and Carol are gonna get together.
Yep.
Because Horny Steve is top billed. He's front main character name when the movie opens.
Credits.
In the credits. And a woman that he's top billed with.
Yep.
Turns out later that he and that woman never say a word or are even in the same scene together.
Yeah, right.
Because she doesn't appear until halfway later in the film.
Yep.
But I know that he's the important character. He's, I think, the main character at this point. So even though he's horny for the woman, we've already established that she's angry at her boyfriend, and her boyfriend doesn't really treat her that well. So I'm thinking, okay, there has to be something happening that he and her end up. So probably boyfriend Jim also dies.
Yep.
Or he has to sacrifice himself for them in a heroic thing. So I've got the end of the film
That's right.
in my mind already now.
You've been preconditioned.
I know who's the spy. I know who's going to die. I
Yep.
think I've got it.
Yep.
Little do I know that I'm totally wrong.
We'll revisit.
little-
we'll revisit that at the end and see how
think
accurate your estimates were.
I think you've got a better movie in your head than the one that was actually
pretty good.
watched.
That's compelling.
Yeah. The Russian spy who's sabotaging the rocket from the inside.
I've
That
seen
would have
too
been
many.
awesome.
I've seen too many good movies. That's why.
That would have been awesome.
You're describing what film became.
yeah.
Okay, so
So he lets him go on television
so in the end he says, "Oh, all right, you sad bastard."
and hangs the
Yeah,
phone up.
go on.
Doesn't dob him in.
Yeah.
But it tells you something about his character a little bit. The
Steve. Yeah, he
You
may
know.
be gruff. He may
Yeah.
be horny.
Yeah.
But he's got a heart of gold.
Well, he's a human.
He's a
He's
human.
not a mechanical
Yeah.
sort of entity.
His heart's in the right place.
That's right.
In there somewhere. He's a bit of a rough diamond.
Yep.
Okay, so then they're going to launch the rocket.
Yes.
Now, if you're going to go into space, what clothes would you wear?
It's worse than that.
No, it's not.
They turned up in a taxi, right? And
too.
the taxi parked at the foot of
the rocket.
gangway leading up
to
to
the
the
rocket.
rocket. And there were a bunch of generals and shit around, a bunch of photographers or whatever, literally underneath the rockets of the rocket. And they turned up in a taxi.
Yeah.
They got out and started shaking each other's hands. And only at that point did I realise, holy shit, that's the rocket they're getting on. Because it looked like they were turning up to a meeting or a press conference or something like that, because they're quite literally in khaki short sleeve shirts and
Yeah, they're around the house clothes.
just banging and knocking around the house clothes. And they proceed to then shake a few hands, say goodbye, walk up a gangplank, close the door behind them. Countdown starts. It's
Yeah,
like,
it had a little button, had a little launch button that he like Wallace and Gromit, you know. Beep.
and someone asked the question straight away, because they're in this little room. This looks like a little room,
Yeah,
but the rocket is standing straight up and down.
yeah.
And I think Steve asked a question like he's never been on the rocket before, and it
Probably hasn't.
makes you think
No.
maybe he should have gone on the rocket at least once before he goes on the rocket. But it's standing upright on the ground. But the room that they're in is also upright, and somehow the rocket flies like that.
The rocket flies horizontally.
What happens to the room? But can you remember what the science is that they say to him about how the room
It's on a
works?
gyroscope. So
Yeah.
the room rotates.
That's right.
They have
Of course.
they have magnetic
That's right.
field stabilizers.
That's right.
True.
Because Carol floats around, hits her head and everything.
Yeah.
Because she's the woman.
Oh, are
She
you
has to
saying
do
they
this
have
stupid thing.
artificial gravity?
They have magnetic field stabilizers
Yeah.
to equalize the gravitational pull of the Earth and later the Moon.
Right.
So
Well,
they
that's
have artificial
not.
gravity.
No, that's not artificial gravity.
Well, not the
Well,
science as we
is
know
it supposed to be artificial gravity?
Yeah,
think so.
because there's no floating.
I think so. I think when the
Well, this is my
spaceship is
point. Well,
horizontal there.
There's one problem
way.
that the room has to rotate because the ship flies.
This is where I'm
like
getting
this,
to.
right?
First of all, if you're going to go horizontal in space, you don't have to rotate any room
You
to
don't
go
have
anything.
to rotate the room. I don't think it does.
Well,
No, it does.
That's what he asks.
No, it does.
That's
Does
what
it
he
say that?
asks. Yeah, because he asks what happens when we.
Remember, they
Oh.
climb up through the hole in the floor.
That's right.
And then when it goes horizontal,
Yeah.
the room rotates and the hole in the floor goes somewhere else,
Yeah.
I
out,
should
to
have
the,
watched the film a second time.
out of the back of the ship.
Yeah.
So did they have artificial gravity? I mean,
well, they
they
have
didn't.
to because
They have to because there was floating. There was
There's no
float. No, they don't show it, but they talk of the radio.
Oh, did they?
They say, oh, Carol kept bumping her head
Oh, that's
on the
right, they did
ceiling
too.
until
Oh, right.
we got the magnetic field stabilizers
that's
working.
Right. Yes. They did too.
They don't show it. No,
Yeah.
they don't have that.
They
Special
certainly,
effects
well,
budget.
I'll put it this way: they certainly didn't put much effort
No,
into it.
No.
Because
And some of this stuff he found out in the actual cockpit. Like he had to ask questions about what's going to happen in space as they were launching into space.
He's
Yeah.
the reporter. He's supposed to play the role of the spectator.
Yeah.
No, he's playing it
He's
well.
not a very good reporter.
People back
There's
home are dying to
zero
know.
research.
what does this button do?
Nothing if you don't push it. As long as you don't push it. That's a good picture.
What the hell?
This is neck braid acceleration
Yeah.
where they don't have any head
Yeah.
support.
Oh yeah. And when they strap themselves in for the launch,
In the reclined lying down position,
yes.
with a.
What were they being strapped into?
They were being strapped into bunks.
Yeah, bunks that were made out of like
Little tube.
little tubes of aluminium with a
little
little
bit of
like
canvas.
yes, they had a little leather belt that goes over their tummy while they launch.
Yeah, that's all you needed. All right, so they're
All right,
in space.
They're in space.
It's worth noting that the miniature rocket launch special effects weren't too bad.
Yep.
I've seen worse.
Yep.
They weren't for 1951.
So they had a shot of a rocket blast on some
Yep.
concrete, and then they had a shot of the rocket ascending
Yep.
with smoke coming out the back.
No scale, like it literally looks
Yeah.
like it was
It's a model
that big.
with a little flame out the back.
you
Flame
know,
goes sideways because the camera was probably tilted.
Yeah, but so they're in space.
All right, so they have a bit of a They talk to home base, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
about getting their gravitational indicator organised or whatever it was. And then there's a bit of a problem. And what's the problem?
They get pulled. They get to go into the moon's gravity well.
They almost crash into the moon.
That's right. That's right. So they have to hit the rockets.
Space isn't that big. It's like,
That's right.
let's take off, press button. Oh, shit! The moon!
Of course, a journey to Mars has to go past the moon.
Oh, the moon's right in between the Earth and
Moon's
Mars.
in
Everybody knows
space,
that.
of course. When you go into space.
That's right. And they managed to escape by initiating a rocket blast
Yes.
to break free of the moon's gravitation.
That almost breaks their necks
Yes.
when they when the actors act the
And
acceleration.
They have what the film in this film we can put it down to a phrase. We'll term it as the rocket blast facial expression.
Yeah.
Because most of the visual effect is the facial expression.
Yeah.
Where each character has their own version
Of miming
of some kind of
under pressure.
which looks a lot like someone having a stroke. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you shake your head a lot, some sort of jaw clenching, that is moving fast.
G-forces.
That's what moving fast in space looks like.
All right. So after this is it. This is what. Look at. Can you go back?
Let me
one?
bring that. I'll bring that photo up.
Look at Carol. What's her face there?
My mouse has died.
Oh.
So leave it with me. I'll bring
And
that up.
it looks like in the photo that somebody's not even strapped down. Somebody was just standing with his arms braced against the wall, holding on for dear life.
Certainly, all of them, I think, were in that shot. They're grabbing on. Yeah.
The one on the back there.
And I think
Look
this
at Carol. What's her face here? What expression is that?
this must be for promotional purposes, because for starters, he's the journo, and he's the only one actually holding on to the controls. Is the journo? That's the scientist over there doing nothing, pressed against the wall. Don't know what he's doing. He's pondering something where he left his lunch.
Where he gets his next
I think
drink
he's,
or
he's
something
just
or other.
reaching down for a bottle of beer or something.
It's
I don't
a
know.
very bizarre image.
What's this guy? I mean,
He's the
He's-
journo.
yeah, I bet he's been on like bombers in World War II. Surely he can remember what it was like when
but
the
he's
bomber was turning left or
At
something or
this
other.
stage, he's probably more bomber pilot than actor.
Oh, I used to do this when we were bombing Germany.
And in order to get into character, they're all wearing bomber jackets. I don't think we finished that train of thought. I think we left. You started talking
Yeah.
about what they're wearing.
Yeah.
They're a gang of. It's not a gang. It's a crew. It's a bomber crew. They're
Yeah.
having the
Yeah.
jackets with the thick
Woolen stuff.
in a lining. They've got the hats,
Yeah.
the bomber hats as well. They look like a bomber crew.
I can't recall this from the film. Can you?
No,
Not
this
that
must be a
shot.
I think it
promotion.
was
You're
a
right. It's
promo
probably
shot.
it's a photograph anyway. It's a photograph.
And then it
not
looks like it was post-coloured.
Yeah, that's
of
what.
course
Yeah.
it would have been.
Look at this. He doesn't even look happy.
No.
Oh. Well, I mean, not happy. I mean,
I think he's not
If
happy
this is a
at this guy's effort because he's not putting
yeah,
any
he's like,
effort in.
this guy's looking so sad.
Yeah.
And this guy's like, what the hell is that guy doing? And Carol's like, oh, I just wish I was home. I want to go home and...
And he's thinking, well, surely I should be holding the controls. I'm the science guy. He's the writer.
Also, as movie posters go, when you think let's do a movie poster, let's do a promo shot of our flight to Mars, is the 5 people sitting
Yeah.
All right.
in their chairs the best choice for a movie poster?
Yeah, no.
Now, I don't want to get too
Terrible.
nerdy on you for this movie, but what is the actual lever that he's pulling
That's
there?
a broomstick. He's quite literally a silver broomstick. That is the only controls that he's been given. And I can guarantee that the reason they gave him to him because he's the headline actor.
Yeah.
And
He's got to be in the front.
and
he's
the
gotta be pulling
audience,
lever.
the pre-audience, who people that were thinking about going to see the film would want to see the lead actor as the guy controlling the thing and not the guy with the pencil over against the window, which is what he was.
Like I was saying, I don't want to get too nerdy on you,
Yeah.
but in this spaceship, what does that lever do?
Uh.
I don't know.
You saw it twice, Dan. You're the one who saw the movie as many times as Dave and I.
I don't want to get too nerdy on this, right? But that's the lever that launches the space cylinders with the bloody messages that you send home.
Well, then it's correctly that he should be doing it. He's
Yeah.
the reporter. He's
Well, then-
reporting.
Then all
We're
of their
reporting
reactions-
our deaths. We're
then
just about to
all
die.
Of, all of their reactions are now really curious.
Why the hell is he pulling that?
He's just launching a tube.
That's not the
And they're
controls.
freaking out at it.
Interestingly, also the colorist did not know what the actual colors were
Oh, right, right.
because she colored the space suits in various different colors,
Mm.
where they were all brown. in the
Yes,
film.
there was a lot of brown in this movie.
Yes.
Yeah, we
It
can
was
left
like
over,
khaki and brown.
left
Yeah,
over
it's
from
not-
other films.
Technicolor, it was
Yeah.
browner color.
All right. So where are we in our piece? Where we've just
Okay.
avoided the moon.
So we just avoided the moon.
we did also see a meteor shower.
No, that comes up. That comes up.
We are
Don't-
out of radio range. Did we mention that?
We
They say that. They say we're now
Yes,
out of radio
we're now.
range.
Yep, yep.
Then they philosophize a little bit.
They have
about-
tea and lunch. They all sit down and have a cup of. Oh, it's probably coffee, but yes.
And they talk about, how are we going to get back? And the morose old professor says, I don't want to go back.
yeah, I don't want to go back. I think we're all going to die.
We're all going to die. Nothing matters. It brings everyone down with his attitude.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of person you take with you on a long trip?
You know, they go through years of psychoanalysis before people are allowed to go on these things.
And after they philosophize, then they avoid the moon.
Yep.
And now they are on the way to Mars with no obstacles. Or so they thought.
And it's during that discussion that Steve identifies that Carol is a prize package.
Is that
And she's also very feminine.
a Poonhound of the first
Yeah.
caliber?
And he kind of likes that.
Well, he tries to have his way with her out in the next room on the rocket on the way to Mars.
Yes, we'll get to that in a second, but there's one thing that we haven't got to during this little scene.
The reporting that he does?
Nope.
He writes some notes.
No. The philosophizing.
I
Dr.
just-
Lane.
I just spoke about that.
Okay, well, what does he discuss?
Oh, the multiple universes, and that if
Sort of.
you travel from one planet to the other is like going from one universe
Oh,
to the
infinite
other.
smallness.
Yeah, infinite smallness.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And what
That
else?
We're probably in a universe which is no more than a microbe, or a
That's what he's saying, yeah.
in the body of somebody else.
So apart from it being infinitely big in the up direction, it's also infinitely small in the down. This is what I heard. There's a theory that the universe is infinitely big in the up direction, infinitely small in the down direction,
Yep.
and also a living thing with everybody inside is
That's
a
right.
corpuscle.
it's corpuscle.
Yes, a corpuscle inside, and it's like I was watching that, and after he spouts this lunatic theory, you know, I would be like on that ship, I'd be like, oh shit, you know, we're strapped to a rocket with an idiot
Yeah, with a whiny idiot.
with a death wish, and this guy who's a lunatic and has
Yeah.
no plan to escape this. Yeah, it's a bloody disaster. All right, so what happens next is Steve and Carol. So they go off and they're sort of walking around the ship. Not that there's much room, and they have a bit of a chat in the corridor. So they've gone off to get the space biscuits or whatever it is they had to get.
That's right.
And so what goes on in the corridor between Steve and Carol?
Personal space was invaded.
Yes, there was invasion of personal space.
Invasion of the body snatching.
That's the story beat right there. At which point she was not anti the personal space invasion,
Yes.
but
She didn't go
she
with
still
it. She
felt
still left it.
she
let
still
it
felt
happen.
slightly obligated to Captain Jim.
Yes. And so Steve, once halfway through a sentence, decides to kiss her on the face. And her reaction is, whatever.
Well, yeah.
And then he decides to grab her and squeeze her shoulder and twist her neck to one side and then kiss her on the face again.
That's right. The Hollywood pash.
Yeah, serious pash. And Carol's like, yeah, whatever.
Still
And then
not on board, not on board.
yeah, and then Steve's like, well, that should piss off Jim, shouldn't it? And Carol's like, yeah, that'll piss Jim off.
Jim doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah, Jim's in the other room. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah,
Who are these people?
Yeah,
What are they doing? And why are they doing it?
exactly.
So, yeah. Surly Carol is one strange, twisted weirdo.
Yeah.
Steve's not much better.
Well, Steve's a creep.
Invasion of the personal space. All right, so then the next scene is they're going to launch some space cylinders, and whilst they're in the process of doing that, there's an attack of the meteors.
That's right.
Special effects.
Special effects.
Red,
That's right.
red blobs.
Red blob.
And the red blobs hit the ship
Yep.
and take out the space tube apparatus.
Yep.
Why are they
Not
red,
the space
though?
tube.
Why
I thought they took
Not the
it-
space
I thought it
cylinders.
took
No.
out the space cylinder launch
the
mechanism.
landing mechanism, isn't
Was
it?
It takes out the landing mechanism.
Oh.
And that landing mechanism, the prop for that. Oh, they have some cupola that they open, pull some cables out.
Mm.
That's a rear gunner turret from a bomber.
Is it?
Yeah. With
Oh,
the guns removed.
Yeah. That's one of the techno things inside the spaceship.
And the entire inside of the spaceship is a prop from some other film that was reused. All the uniforms, everything.
Yeah. It's Journey to the Moon. Is the spaceship is Journey? The set is Journey to the Moon, which will also come into. We'll have a discussion about that later when Teletubbies is brought up as well.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, gentlemen, why are the meteors glowing red? Because they explained that.
Do they?
Yes.
I can't remember why.
No, I remember them saying that they're the shooting stars that people see in the night sky.
No, they say they're glowing red because due to friction with the Earth's atmosphere, the meteors start glowing red.
What?
Even though
Yes.
we're nowhere near the Earth's atmosphere.
We're beyond the orbit of the moon.
And they're still red.
Out of
they're
radio
glowing red
range.
because due to friction with the Earth's atmosphere.
Destination Moon is
Destination Moon.
that other film.
Yeah.
With an identical rocket in it.
All right. So how do they avoid the meteors? They push a button and they avoid the meteors, and everybody switches to the left, and we've done it. So I was thinking, how did they avoid the moon? They push a button and they go around the moon and avoid the moon. And the meteors, they push a button and they go around the moon.
Yep.
I don't know. There's some sort of thing where you want the heroes to actually do stuff. Do heroic things when it's like, oh, look, here's some danger. Oh, don't worry, it's gone away now. It's like,
Is this where the lights turn off and Carol needs to be reminded to turn on the emergency lights?
That's right.
And she goes, oh yes, that's right. And turns the lights back on.
Oh, I think actually wasn't Jim getting the shits with her? He said, Carol, turn on the friggin' lights.
Yeah.
And
so she's
Carol's like,
essentially
"You don't have to
helpless
worry."
the entire time. She bumps her head and she's
The
along.
only thing she got taken on the trip for was to turn those lights on
That's all she
and
did.
get the bickies and coffee.
Yeah.
Which was the only food they took, I think.
All right then. So now that they don't have any landing gear, they have to make a decision. And the decision basically is,
Turn around and go home,
yep,
which they probably won't make it because they haven't got the fuel,
yep.
or land.
Oh, so they only have fuel for a one-way trip anyway.
I think so, yeah.
The additional thing is that they can't land anywhere. They're going to crash.
It's crash land because they've lost the ability to land.
So they can either crash on Earth or crash on Mars.
Yep.
And they decide to crash on Mars.
Dr. Lane writes a letter. He writes a diary. Dr. Lane, the chief, not the chief engineer, but the head of the project.
Oh yeah. Yep,
which shows that he can't spell. Spelling mistakes in that letter that he writes. He spells satisfactorily with a, satisfactorily. He spells Earth with a lowercase e.
Mm-hmm.
He's the head of the project.
Yeah.
yeah, he's a freaking lunatic with the corpuscles.
He's the corpuscle dude.
Corpuscles of the universe. All right, so to cut a long story short, they crash on Mars.
Yes.
No. You got to go more into that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You got to go into the crash landing, which is the most hilarious crash landing ever.
Well, okay, here's my thing about the crash landing, right? So they've got one guy that's Jim, looking out the window to try and find a suitable landing site.
Yep.
And then when it comes to so they're like, we're going to try and find okay, give us coordinates for the suitable landing site, okay? And then when we cut to the special effect of the rocket, it's flying horizontal at about 1 trillion miles an hour and crashes into the side of a mountain.
Yeah. Not before.
Impales itself.
And
they accelerate.
It was cruising at 1 million miles an hour. And then when they get close to the mountain, they gun it.
Yeah, they gun it.
And you can hear the engines fire up. And he's straight into the side of the mountain, and then it sort of goes. Boosh, boosh.
And it hangs there, and then an avalanche drops on top of it. Because Mars is all snow, right? Because it's cold.
And they can see the dirt, the snow and the dirt building up against the window in the cockpit.
Yeah, and they're all
Oh
inside
my God,
going,
we're going to be... And then Carol says, oh no, hang on. Look out this window. There's no snow. And then they walk out.
Walk out. Yeah, that was a bit of luck.
We didn't die.
Yeah, it was good. That's all right landing.
And only hit us on one side of the ship.
So,
Insane.
and not only did they crash into a mountain, it just happened to be in the middle of a local alien city.
Yes, an abandoned city, or at least they see structures that were clearly made and not natural, but they appear to be abandoned.
Yep.
Like chimneys.
Okay, so they're wandering around and they're checking things out, and then immediately a bunch of aliens turn up.
They come around a corner, and I'm going to put up a picture. And you can dispute this, but I believe this is where the Teletubbies came from. This is what they were presented with. We have about 6 individuals, all in different coloured, bizarre-looking spacesuits with big spherical helmets. Clearly no glass in the helmets.
And you can't see through the helmets. They're like the same colour as the spacesuits.
Yes, and they quite literally look like Teletubbies.
Yes,
Yeah,
it looks
pretty
like
much.
they're wearing sort of flannelette, shiny flannelette suits.
Yeah.
There's a handy zipper at the front.
Yes,
Yeah.
a handy zipper. Okay, so what's the other thing about these spacesuits? The other movie, Journey to the Moon. What was it called? X to the Moon, Journey to the Moon. You just corrected me on what it was called. Don't have to remember if you don't want to.
Yeah, I can't remember it.
But all of the astronauts in that movie wear those suits.
Oh, really?
Those are the good guy astronauts who land on the moon.
Same helmets?
Same.
Just not coloured, yeah?
Pretty sure
Oh,
same
dear.
helmets.
Oh,
Just
dear.
not coloured.
They didn't even try to change props in any way.
However,
Destination Moon.
Destination Moon, right? However, they've got all of these belts and equipment and straps and harnesses and backpacks and all sorts of things all over them.
Mhm.
So it looks a lot better in Destination Moon. These guys just look like Teletubbies.
Yeah.
You might have to watch Destination Moon one day and compare it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
seems
I
to be
think,
very similar, just a different different planetoid.
I think
Yep.
it's actually a little bit better as well.
Oh,
This-
oh.
This is
oh.
a
What?
comparison.
Destination Moon has a main character by the name of Jim Barnes.
Jimmy
And-
Barnes, the lead singer.
Oh
for
no, this is Jim
Cultures.
Barker. No, Jim Barker.
Oh, okay.
Jim Barker, and this one, Jim Barnes. They redo everything. Even the names were used in other films before.
So they didn't have to replace the plaque on the door or the actor's door.
They just
They
cobble everything together.
That's a shot from Destination Moon. So there are subtle differences, but you can clearly see that there is a design sensibility that is carrying.
Can you find another shot?
Between
Is
the
there another
two.
one around? Because
Let's see. Let's see what other shots we have.
Same acting for acceleration, by the
Yeah,
looks of
yeah,
it.
the same
Yes.
facial expression for the acceleration.
I think in that picture, the guy in the background just farted.
Same 2 seatbelt
Facial
reclined,
expressions tell
lying
that
down.
story.
There we go.
Yeah, there you
There it
go,
is.
see?
It's the same suit.
it is.
We
It's
know.
the exact same suit as this guy over here
Yeah.
in this film. So
Yeah.
yes,
No, it's not. This one has a bigger neck. The neck is different,
no, they got the same necks. This.
but it's probably
No,
side
it's
on. It's
just-
wider.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, we're turning this into a visual essay. So we'll close that down.
Okay, so who's Mr. Blue there? Mr. Blue Teletubby.
He has a name,
Yes.
Icron, is it?
Akron, and he turns out to be the biggest kahuna
Yes.
of the land.
Top kahuna of the Kahuna Council.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, all right. So they basically take them inside their world and say, "Hello, Earthman,"
Mm-hmm.
and then they say, "Oh yes, you speak English.
Yep.
What's the deal with that?"
Yeah. And
Nice.
why do these Martians speak English, Dan?
Because they like human radio.
Yeah, they'd be listening to all of the broadcasts.
Yes, they've been listening to the classics.
Can you imagine what they think of Earth if their only knowledge of Earth is from radio broadcasts?
Yes, Lucille Ball or something or
Yeah,
other. I don't know
yeah.
what. Okay, so they take him inside, and we also hear about this time about their wonder mineral that they have on Mars.
Can you remember the name of it? I can't remember the name of it.
Unobtainium. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
Corium.
Corium, is it?
Yes.
And it's their source of power.
Mhm.
It's the source of...
I don't know. They make air out of it.
Everything.
And eat it. So I
Yeah.
don't know what they do. But there's corium's the awesome stuff on this.
That's right.
this
And
planet.
unbeknownst to our heroes, and we soon find out, corium is in very scarce, is a scarce resource and fast running out.
Short supply.
So the story in this film is that Mars used to be a lush planet,
Yes.
then lost all its atmosphere and all the plant life died, and the Martians had to move underground,
Mm-hmm.
where they now make their oxygen artificially from that mineral.
Big underground cities.
Yes. All right. So they get taken down to the power council or whatever it is, the ruling council of the Mars people.
And they like to wear. See if we can find an image here. They like to wear outfits that
They have fantastic robes.
that
Huge.
have an icon on the chest of
a rocket.
of what you do,
Is it a
sort of
rocket?
thing.
No, it's the
Yeah.
rocket is the humans.
Rockets for
are
the
the
humans
humans.
because they came in a rocket. I think the ruling class have a lightning bolt,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
they do.
you're right. Yeah,
and which is almost a bit Flash Gordon-y.
Yeah.
in its
And they have
makeup.
huge Magneto type giant cowls or giant
Big
robes.
shoulder
that they-
pads. And,
Huge,
yeah.
like Thor,
Yep.
yeah.
Thunder God.
And they're
Boots,
they're
leather
taken before
boots.
the is it Ikron introduces the humans to the committee.
Yeah.
And the entire Martian committee, in fact, everywhere on Mars, they're sitting on 1950s Eames molded plastic designer
yes,
chairs.
very Art
Which
Deco.
are Art Deco,
Yeah.
were popular in the 50s on Earth.
Yes, and all of the
That's what they're all sitting in.
and
Yes,
all of
they
the
were modern.
walls are sort of 45-degree angle
Yeah.
walls
I
and
love
things like that.
45-degree angle
Yeah,
walls.
there's no quicker way to reduce space to move around than to put your walls at 45
Yeah, I know.
degrees.
Bang your
You're
head. as
banging
you
your
walk.
head, so everybody has to walk on this side of all the roads. So yes, the extension of friendship, the hand of friendship is extended to the crew,
Mm-hmm. And so, yes, they sort of say, let's be friends.
and we will help you fix your ship so that you can get home, and you can use our wonder element to repair your nuclear
Yeah.
whatever they
Your
things-
atomic. They didn't have nuclear
That's
in those
right.
days. It was
Your
all
atomic,
Your atomic power.
power unit.
And so they also, Ikron suspiciously asks, what is this atomic power you speak of? And then they say, we'll tell you later.
Yep.
And so what I was thinking at this point in the movie was like, oh, cool. The aliens don't turn out, the aliens aren't jerks.
Yep.
Oh, sweet. That's a bit of a twist of what my expectations were going to be.
I'd made the mistake of reading a little blurb about the film beforehand,
Okay.
which said, it was like 2 sentences, and it says, humans fly to Mars when the Martians want to use the humans' rocket to invade Earth. And just reading that synopsis going,
spoilers.
what the... So the Martians who sit there wait for humans to come so they can steal the vehicle and go back and invade the planet.
It's
Interesting film.
That's not one of your better written taglines. It's more like just a
It's a
blatant
spoil line.
Spoil line.
Yeah. All right. So then they say, let's not talk about atomic power now. These guys are probably tired
Hungry.
and hungry. So let's send them back to their rooms.
That's right.
So
at which
we meet one character,
Terrace?
Terrace.
She's the female who takes them to their quarters?
who later turns out to be quite the bitch.
Yeah.
She's quite the mole.
She's a bit of a spy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But she takes them to their quarters and introduces them to the Marsification of the dwellings.
Yes.
Things like
and the
you
amazing,
don't have to wash your dishes.
Yeah,
and
the
if-
amazing
we have another,
technology. that
we
they
have another Carol moment here.
Yeah.
Where she says, these are the quarters on the left and the right. Do you want to lie down, freshen up, take a shower? And Carol says, I want to see the kitchen.
That's right. Yes, we don't have kitchens. Oh my God.
I love you, Mars. No, the dishes do themselves.
Yeah, we don't have dishwasher machines to wash dishes.
Yes, that's right.
What a world we live
Oh, I love you.
So yes, and that's the introduction to the Mars world, pretty much.
Yep.
Then we get into the thick of the plot.
Right, so yes, the next one is Ikron's double cross.
Mm.
So we're back in the council room,
Yep.
and they're finishing up their discussion, and basically they're going to double cross the Earthlings.
And we also
They
get
vote on
introduced
that.
to the notion.
True,
that-
they vote on it.
They vote on it. There's those people who are against it.
Well, we get
Yeah.
introduced to the notion that one of the members on the council, his name is
Tillamar?
Tilmar, yeah.
used to be in charge. And Ikron is now in charge in place of him, but Tillamon had a different idea. He was going to go in a different direction. I can't remember exactly what that direction was from that early conversation.
Yeah, some sort of friendly sort of.
But he was more, yes, he wanted to reach out and ask for help, whereas Ikron wants to take, and he wants to protect Mars from pending doom that'll come from the humans on Earth. And they'll launch an attack once they know we're here, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, we're introduced to the notion that Ikron wants to let them fix the ship right up until the point where they're about to leave and then seize them and then use the technology to replicate many more ships and get out of Dodge and go and live on Earth.
Go and invade Earth and take over.
That's right. So that's the grand plan from Ikron.
Okay, so the heroes are going to fix the ship. And so one of the first things that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to convert some of the chromium to be useful in their ship instead of atomic power because...
They also at this stage turn into a bikie gang because they take out their...
Oh, that's right. When on Mars, dress as the Marses do or something or other.
They'll go into
so they're all in leather.
black leather.
Yeah. They're all in black
the
leather.
rocket ship emblem on a shield.
Yeah, it's bloody awesome. Okay, so...
And I think it's worth noting that as far as outfits and uniforms go, Mars has decided to go for a length of skirt that almost doesn't qualify as a skirt.
Yes.
And it's closer to a belt.
Yeah.
Where you're talking literally a hair's width above the minge area or below until you move in any way, and then obviously the game is all over. And that's what the women wear.
They have some excellent miniskirt technology on Mars.
Yes.
They're pushing all boundaries.
Yes.
Also, they have fantastic, fabulous shoes, the women.
The shoes were incredible. I think even if you ask women today what they thought of those shoes,
the heel extends all the way upwards to the nape
back
of the knee.
The calf.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's the sort of shoe that you would see in a Beyonce film clip today.
Yeah.
The style of the outfits, you can sort of tell that someone put some thought into the outfits.
If a woman ever crouches on Mars, she's going to ram those shoes right up her miniskirt.
Yeah.
Right up into her belt.
That's right. That's right.
Right into a belt. Exactly.
Crazy shit.
All right, then. So, Professor Jim, smoking his pipe and checking out some plans.
He sort of takes over. He's
the engineer.
Everyone else just hangs out in the...
Yeah,
he's the engineer. He's the only one who knows anything about the rocket.
We're starting
ship,
to wonder, what's the doctor do? What does the old boy do on this?
The old boy,
ship?
the morose professor, he is
with the strange theories. I don't know. He doesn't do anything.
No,
he
he's
just
the
disappears.
head of the... He made it happen. There's the other old guy.
I think that's what it is. I think obviously he's just put the team together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Came up with the funding, so I get a seat.
Yeah.
When reality would state that, well, you don't take the useless git over there that is really just the money man. He's the producer. We need people on this crew that can do things.
No, they take the producer, they take the engineer's girlfriend, they take a reporter who's never seen the spaceship, and the only other guy of merit is the old morose professor who is there as a professor of geology and chemistry and astronomy.
Yeah. And can't do anything.
He's supposed to look at
collect facts and
samples,
put them into the space cylinder.
He can't do anything with engineering or
no,
wires
so
and cables.
if Jim had fallen out of the spaceship,
They're
which in
all
this
fucked.
film would not be unlikely, they'd be stuffed. Yeah,
they'd be right now passing Pluto.
So Jim gets a new assistant
who has a ginormous slide rule under her arm.
Yes.
No, does she?
Oh,
I
no,
noticed
it's a calipers. She comes in with these 4-foot-long calipers under her arms. I'm an engineer. I'm here to assist you.
That's right.
And because she's a woman, he goes, "You are an engineer."
Yeah.
And then he looks at his metal samples, and she immediately tells him, "This is the good one because of the melting point, blah de blah." And he fancies. He says, "All right, you'll do.
This
You'll
dame's
do."
got some brains on her.
That's right. And the whole time also starting to recognise that she is a female as well. He takes a liking to her straight away.
And she approves of him as well.
That's correct.
Which is important because she is, of course, the daughter of Tillamer.
Yeah.
Who is the guy who was in favor of...
He's the nice president.
Yes.
Not leader.
The ex-leader.
Ex-leader
who wants to make peace.
Who wants to make peace, yes.
All right, so they get on and they start doing sciencey things, and then they quickly work out how to make the chromium work in the rocket.
Yep.
Okay, so that's all organised.
Yep.
However, then they start to learn of the plan that they're going to be double-crossed.
Yes.
And so they've got to come up with a counter plan.
And the counter plan is to bring up the schedule, tell them that it's going to take a month, actually fake an explosion so that we can tell the council that it's going to take a month,
Going to take an extra month because we
Knowing that it's only gonna
accidentally
take
broke
2
a
weeks.
thing. Yeah.
knowing that it's only going to take 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And all the Martian assistants that they get a whole crew of engineers from Mars
Yep.
to help them build this spacesuit. They're all wearing what must be from some middle age.
Yeah. Fantasy.
Night drama. They're wearing night.
It looks like a Viking.
Yeah.
They look like they're
From a
from a
Viking movie or
jousting
something.
festival.
Studded leather straps.
They even have the crosses look like swords.
Yeah, they got swords because they're guards.
They're guard uniforms from some other film.
Yeah.
Yeah, there must be.
Yep.
All right, so they do the fake explosion. They pretend it's going to take a month longer, and then they're ripe to escape.
That's right. And the whole time,
So
Bitchy McMoleface, that
Terrace.
Terrace, she's the spy.
Yeah.
She's been reporting everything back to
Icron?
that's
Icron.
right. That's right.
And they know that. They know that she's the spy. So
And she also Terrace also kind of works out that they've accelerated their schedule.
yes, that's right.
And at this point, their plan is to take. So the engineer, we've never mentioned her name. Her name is Alita.
Yes.
Alita, yeah.
She's the Mars princess.
Alita, played by Marguerite Chapman, who is she's a big name for that period of cinema. Legs, 17-foot long legs, and
She
on
had
many
done
posters.
Quite a lot more movies than Cameron Mitchell had
Yes,
done at
absolutely.
that time.
Yeah.
Films
She realistically is the headliner for this film.
yeah, which is why she's top billed. That doesn't show up until the second half of the film.
Yeah, yep.
And never exchanges words with the other top billed character. But I think there's a poster, one of the posters where she's reclining and being kissed by a man, or he's very, very close to her, about to kiss her.
Yep.
And you have to pause on that picture because this is Jim, right? This is Jim
Yep.
in this picture. This is not the
Yes.
picture I'm talking. This one here.
Oh yes, that's
Who is
the other
that?
guy.
That's the
Oh,
other
yeah,
guy.
That's
Isn't
the
it?
other guy.
Steve.
That's Steve.
That's Steve.
That's horny Steve.
He's putting the moves on everyone.
He's
because
and
they're
I
the
swear-
two top billed characters.
they're the
so
two
there's a
top-billed.
poster, and I want to see this film with those two guys getting it off.
That's Cameron Mitchell
And I'm
and
going to
Margaret
go out
Chapman.
of the movies very disappointed.
I would too.
If that's what I come to see.
Yeah, because there was none of that going on.
No, they were never even in the same room together.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
probably not.
that's not even the right colour for her dress.
She's blue. That's right. The whole thing, she's blue. The marketing guys really screwed up on this one, didn't
It's
they?
a ruse.
But the story points. I mean, there's alternative ways this can go. They say, look, Icron wants to, if we get caught, he's gonna take the spaceship, and he's gonna execute us. Tillamar wants to come with them, and Tillamar thinks, oh, if I go to Earth, what's gonna, if we have you escape, they're gonna kill us. And they say, no, we're gonna take you with us to Earth. And he says, oh yeah, if I go to Earth, then I can convince the Earth people to come back and be friendly with us. So at this point, we're having the options of how this film can end.
Yeah.
Will there be war between Earth and Mars? Will there be peaceful? How is this going to resolve?
Yep.
So I'm in anticipation now to see how this will end.
Yes. All right. And what's the next story beat?
The time has come. The time has come to ready to get everyone on the ship.
Okay, yep.
Staggered. Oh no, we better not glaze over the fact that Alita, the lab assistant / princess Martian, comes over for dinner.
That's right. There's a bridge game.
There's a bridge game going on.
Okay.
And,
So what happens at the bridge game?
well, Steve calls her out.
So there's Alita and Jim sitting across each other.
They're partners.
having
they're
a
bridge
great old time.
bridge team.
And then there's surly, pissed off Carol
And Steve.
sitting across each other. And Steve's stirring the pot to give everybody the shits.
Yeah, Steve's calling it out, and literally Steve is saying that can't you see that they're a thing?
Jim and Alita, they're probably,
Yeah.
they're probably getting it on, aren't they?
And then even says to Jim, "This is where you deny it," and they proceed not to deny it.
That's right.
And then whiny mole bursts into tears and runs out of the room.
Yes.
And who goes after her?
Steve in his own intimidable.
Jim doesn't care.
Steve
He
in
has
his.
not cared 1 ounce
Jim
during the
is
entire film.
Yes, he didn't give
Jim
him.
is a cold motherfucker.
Yeah, whatever.
I'll take it to Mars, but I'm not gonna like it.
Yeah. Dumped her on Mars.
Yeah, that's it.
That's pretty cold.
Made us stay in the room.
Yeah.
And then we
I'm going with this Space Princess.
We cut to a scene where Steve is in the bedroom with her in the background crying into a pillow, and he's playing solitaire.
Yeah.
And this whole thing gets built into the movie where that's what he does when she's a crying mess in the corner, is he gets the cards out and plays solitaire. I think later on something also happens and she runs off and he says, "Where's the cards?"
Yeah, that's right.
Why? Because I'm going to need them.
Yeah. And I like his attitude where she's like, you know, and he's like, God, shut up. What are you crying for, you crazy dame? And he's like,
Yeah.
All right. So,
So now the time has come.
now the time has come. So they start sneaking onto the ship because that's part of the plan. They're going to sneak on one at a
stagger
time.
themselves. They gave all of the helpers the day off,
Yep.
but the spy
Has worked Tetris.
has realised that something
that's-
something's going on.
The fuel's in the spaceship, and she's like, "Hang on a
there's
minute, what's
something-
going on
yeah.
here?"
So she goes and reports to Ikron
Mm-hmm.
that I think something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try and find out. And he comes up with the idea to do what? To get
They grab a tiller.
Bring
get
them
Alita.
in for a meeting and then
go and get Alita.
arrest
Yep.
them. Yeah.
She's the one. She'll turn.
Yep.
She'll tell us the truth.
And they start grilling her, saying, "What's going on? Where's all the stuff?" And she's trying to lie to.
And this is the whole council that are grilling her.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I can't quite remember why, but they also go and grab Jim.
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 Oh no,
Professor Jim.
Jim. The
engineer.
Alita and the father. Dilemma, who was. They're both due to go on the ship with them back to Earth.
Yeah, they're
right?
both going back.
They're late,
Uh-huh.
and that's why Jim has to go. He said, something's wrong. I'm going to go and find out. And someone puts it in his idea that Tillamar has betrayed them, that he's told the council of their plan and whatever. And so rather than close the door and get the hell out of there, he says, "No, I'm going.
Well, he needs to get his girl.
I need to go and get the
Because
girl."
here's a girl he cares about.
That's right.
Okay. So he ends up Jim and Attila the nun
Yep.
ends up in the council room.
Yep.
And you know the clock's ticking, and then they say the jig's up. We've got you bang to rights.
That's it.
And then it says we're going to invade Earth and steal your thing, and we're going to do all of this.
Keep them here. We're going to get the ship.
Yes.
And so the bad guys leave the room.
No, the bad guys, the bad guys.
Well, not all
some
of them. Some of them have to stay there with Jim and Alita, and they're holding them in the council chamber.
They're the
there.
moron guards.
Yeah,
yes,
the
who can
moron
be easily
guards.
overwhelmed.
But the Ikron and his cronies, they've left.
Mm-hmm.
They're heading for the rocket, right? There's a little bit of a continuity issue that happens because Jim and Tillamar overpower the guards, punch them out, run out the door, and turn up at the rocket long before anyone else.
Yeah, true.
Also, while they're punching up the guard, Terrace is also still there. Terrace just stands there with she's looking.
That's
she's
right.
not doing anything
That's
because
right.
she's too feminine.
Yeah.
And then they run out. She stands there, and then more guards come, and she says, "Come on, we'll get them!" And then she runs after,
That's
and leading the charge.
And they managed to beat Acheron and everybody to the rocket ship. There's still no sign of Ikron. And I can only imagine that they ran out and ran into the slanty walls, and there's a bunch of people unconscious
Wedged
in a hole,
underneath the slanty wall.
just wedged up in a piece of this really shitty-looking design.
Before we leave that story beat, though, I want to highlight Jim, the actor, executing the worst fake punch ever seen in studio.
There's one back across his body.
Yeah, it was like because they're both facing the camera side by side, so it was like that was the punch. It was like he put his fist kind of in front of the guy's face, not swung, but just sort of placed it there.
Yeah. It was the gravity of Mars. It gave
Yes.
extra punch
yeah.
to the punch.
Stronger. They can leap higher.
So they make it back to the ship on time, but in the interim, right, when all this is going on in the council room, we're back on board the ship, and we witness a conversation between Steve and
Oh, is this when Carol?
And Carol.
Is this where she wants to marry him?
Well, Carol has come to a realization that you'll do.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
pretty much it. It's
Yeah.
pretty much what she says.
Yeah,
Well, I think you're probably going to do.
She says, "I want to marry you," and his reply is, "If you're kidding, I'll break your neck."
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It was a physical threat of death on the ship.
Yep.
And
Probably has it put in the vows.
yes.
If you're kidding, I'll break your neck.
And somehow
till death do us part.
I think they make a perfect couple, actually.
Yeah, I think so too.
And also, well, then anyway, the heroes run on
I
board
think
the
the only
spaceship.
reason they went on the ship was to get married because they did nothing else.
That's true. And when they're on the, when they're on the ship or earlier on the ship, Jim announces that Attila is going to be his wife.
That's right.
As well. So
That's
we're
right.
all hooked up.
That's right.
Okay, so they, I think, then just press the rocket launch button.
Well,
They're about to.
They all they there's a sort of death-defying chase that happens leading all the way up the gangplank, and Jim has to kick the soldiers back, and he finally gets up and locks the door behind him, and then they take off. But they can't take off. Why can't they take off?
Because the roof won't open. Because they've got to open the roof.
Garage door is jammed.
Yes.
And what did they do to unjam the garage door?
They keep pressing the button.
Yes, and
They twiddled the button.
yes.
Twiddle the button some more until it...
To the point where he had to say, "Get out of the road."
Yes.
And he twiddled the button,
Yeah.
and it worked better.
That's right.
Than that person.
Slowly,
twiddling the
eventually it opens by twiddling. So it works. You know,
Yeah,
the plan works.
twiddling works.
Twiddling.
Yeah. It's so you sort of can graph the tension.
Yep.
Tension mounting don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I don't know how much longer you have. It looks like you have.
I mean, if
quite
I
a
was-
few more things on your list.
If
there.
I was writing it, at least they could have hacked into a panel with a screwdriver and pulled out wires, and
Yeah.
there would see spark.
Yeah.
But no, it's just like, oh, just twiddle it again and it works. It's
Yeah.
fine.
And then they launch.
And then they launch.
Yes.
And then
And then what happened?
Roll credits.
I'm going. What? Where's the rest of my film?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Where's the rest? Where's Where's anything?
I was gutted. I didn't like the whole film from the midway point, even after the first third. From there onwards was all about them getting home. Did they get home, Dan?
No, they did not get home.
Well, how do you know they didn't get home?
Well, we didn't see
never
them get
know.
home.
We never know.
We never know.
We never know if they got
what
off
are
the
they?
planet.
We don't
Yes.
know if Earth came. If there was, yeah, we know nothing. No, nothing.
Nothing.
They
They didn't test the rocket. There was no testing, right?
well,
They
there wasn't
literally
any
just-
testing on Earth either.
They literally just got in it and took off. I'm of the opinion that they all died. They all perished. They didn't have enough fuel to break the moon's gravity pull when they came back, when they were on their way back,
Yeah.
and they all died.
Those meteors hit them on the way back when
That's
they, or whatever it was.
And they spared the movie producers, spared us the tragedy and the despair of such a negative ending.
It's revolting.
And-
Up until the very last minute, it could have been a better film.
Yeah.
That ending, the abrupt ending, just spoiled the entire thing.
Isn't
Kingdom
it
Come.
the way? Those 1950s sci-fi films, this is not the first film that
We've
this has
identified
happened.
this many times where
It
they
happened even
end
with Forbidden Planet. We sort of petered out into, we just had a sort of a, that's it, you know.
Well,
Yep.
Forbidden Planet, they got off the planet, they saw it explode, that was resolved, and they're now
Yeah.
traveling back.
Yeah,
But this
I
film
mean,
set us up for potentially more stuff.
Yeah, what was it? The crab monsters. That one was just a finalised thing. Didn't everyone die at the end of the crab monsters?
There's a whole bunch of those, all the way up to the, even in the 1960s and 70s, they're still doing that. With,
It's the end without the resolution.
yeah, there's no conclusion.
We need a conclusion. We you can't just end the film. We need
Yeah.
to. You need to resolve the outcome.
We want to know what happened.
Yeah.
At
yeah.
the very least, they could have gone back to the two guys looking through the telescope
Yeah.
and saying
Yeah,
something.
and they could have narrated the ending and said, "Well, isn't it great that they all got back and everything worked out good and everybody married everybody and
Absolutely.
da 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 da."
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we were robbed of all of those
Yeah.
emotions and feelings.
that's right.
It took 5 days to film the film,
5 days, jeez.
and I think they could have put the 6th day in there. They could have
they
afforded
should've.
the 6th day.
They should have put in a 6 day. It wouldn't have been a massive budget. A lot of the budget, I would say, would have gone to the set pieces and the outfits.
Well, they
No,
were
they
just
just stole
Oh,
them
well,
from
yeah, a
another
lot of it.
movie.
Yeah,
lot of it,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
mainly the actors probably, and the cameraman and the crew.
Yep. I have no indication of what the budget was. Were you able to find anything about budgets?
If it's not on
Mm.
IMDb, I wouldn't know.
I got a feeling in those days the money wasn't documented as well as it is today. Shareholders and things like that weren't really the...
Can't be much of a budget.
No. It was produced by the film company Monogram Films was the production company that produced the film. Monogram Films have done Fargo, Flight to Mars, Blue Steel.
Are you mentioning? Is that
Invisible
actually
Ghost.
listed there?
This is a filmography of...
Fargo, Flight to Mars, Blue Steel. Those three films
In
are
that
just listed.
I don't
as
think.
if-
I don't think it's the Fargo you think it is. It's
okay.
1952 Fargo.
Right. Is it the Blue Steel that I think it is? With
Not the Fargo
with,
you're looking for.
1934 Blue
no,
Steel.
no, different one as well.
No, so they didn't have a huge... It doesn't look like they've got a huge filmography. No, they don't think so. So what have we got? Flight for Mars. Movie meter. I don't know what a movie meter is here on this site. And yes, they've only got one film with gross worldwide earnings. Everything else is unlisted. So what did IMDb give it? 5.2 out of 10.
I think a very
Whoa.
generous 5.2 out of 10.
That is
Yeah, but there was
very
only
nice.
719 people voting for that.
That could be statistically significant. 719 is enough to give that a lower rate. We need to get onto IMDb and rate that thing to bring that down.
Yeah. Yep.
To write this travesty.
All right, so let's rate it, gentlemen. What do you give this thing?
All right, I'll go first. And I kind of like these things. And as I'm setting this up, you can probably tell how this is going to go. I kind of like these things, and I kind of like these 50 science fiction movies, and I kind of like the cheesy things. But on the whole, this one's a pretty lame effort, even if you're looking at it from a very comical sort of spoofy kind of an angle. Yeah, so pretty lame.
Yeah.
Pretty
So
lame.
buy, borrow, burn.
I don't know if I can categorize it like that. I've got actually another way. I wouldn't suggest, if anybody at home thinks they want to watch it, you're wrong. You don't want to watch it.
You don't want to watch it.
But if you don't believe me and you still think you want to watch it, go into YouTube and watch the trailer
Okay.
for it.
Yep.
Did you guys watch the trailer?
No.
Might have.
They take the movie and they chop out 90% of it and make the trailer. And the trailer is exactly the movie. It's just a 2-minute version of the movie. With all of the story beats.
Is that an official trailer?
I guess so.
It might be. It might be the way they did it.
It's got all of the story beats, including the betrayal of the good guys for the bad guys. It's the whole thing, the whole story.
Teletubbies turning up and everything.
Everything's in there in the trailer. So that would be my thing to watch.
Well,
the
I
trailer.
got to check that out anyway.
I have also one other thing I wanted to bring up, which is a comment that I got from somebody, which kind of sums up, I think, a good way to think about this movie.
Yes.
So here it is. The flight to Mars has only 6 things going for it. Marguerite Chapman's legs, Lucy Barclay's legs, and Virginia Houston's legs.
And they might be onto something.
There's a lot
there.
of legs.
They might be onto something there. Yes, I can relate to where they're coming from there.
So I think it has excellent legs, but
The movie has legs,
it has legs.
Yeah.
but I
But-
still wouldn't watch it.
I wouldn't watch it.
Yeah, for me it's a burn. I don't think history needs
Burn
it. As a cinematic record of the sci-fi times from an era where so many cool things came from it, and I think there are elements there that could have worked and just didn't. It was poorly written. It was poorly executed.
Poorly acted.
Yeah, it was poorly acted. the character of the characters was not compelling in any way. And in such extreme circumstance, it's the formula of put ordinary people in extraordinary circumstance or vice versa. And in this instance, they needed to put ordinary people in extraordinary circumstance, but neither paid off. Neither was ordinary enough, and the circumstance petered out to be nothing.
Yes.
Teletubbies were no real threat. So, no, it missed on every level.
And sorry, bringing back to Tom's point, and we'll let, is that nobody died, nobody here. Like you said, the heroes weren't really in any jeopardy. No. Nobody got in any trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's no real threat.
No, and we see the betrayal from miles away, and the other stuff that I thought I saw from miles away didn't even happen. So it was as you said, I probably anticipated a better film than it was.
Yep.
So yeah, for me, it's a burn, definitely, especially because of the robbed ending.
Yeah.
Just that alone makes, even if the rest of the film would be better.
Well, before we so it's burn for you, burn
Yes.
for me,
Burn.
So it's
Burn the
unanimous.
sucker.
It's a burn. Before we go, there was a question that I put out into the social sphere, and I want you guys to weigh in on it. The decade that is the golden era of sci-fi for film. Which area of the timeline do you find you're constantly going back to, or you're referring to, or as the golden time
Of sci-fi.
of sci-fi?
You have to define the golden time, because
Well,
these
golden time
kind
was where they were doing a whole lot that we'd never seen before, and it made such a mark on what we've seen since.
Yeah, I think it was the 50s.
There's a couple of close contenders. The 70s, they were doing some pretty cool stuff in the 70s. 60s,
yeah,
they weren't
I'm
doing
a fan
much.
of the 80s.
And the 80s, they were doing some pretty cool
Yeah,
stuff.
but the 80s, they're doing all sorts of different things that are not only sci-fi.
Yeah.
Well, the 80s have the good films, but that's maybe because I grew up with those.
Yeah.
The 50s is, I think, like this era, Forbidden Planet, Voyage to the Moon.
Yep.
Destination Moon, sorry.
Yeah,
which I have not
Destination
seen,
Moon.
But I've heard of that one many times. So
I love those films like
When Worlds Collide.
When
what was
Worlds
that?
Collide.
That was pretty good.
I love the film When Worlds Collide. That
1951.
That premise where the Earth is doomed and a planet is going to crash into it.
Yeah, we got to do.
And it's Noah's Ark sort of thing.
Yeah.
With
And Invaders
humans.
from Mars is also from the 50s.
What's the one where the ship, the alien saucer, lands in the park?
The Day the Earth Stood Still.
The Earth stood still. It's got to be
That's
in the same.
48 or something.
Got to be in that same area.
That's all black and white. I think that's
Is
even
it?
older.
It's close to that.
It's got to be close
that
to
era.
that 50 turnover.
It's certainly the groundbreaking where all of those archetypal things
No, you're right.
were.
1951,
Yeah.
same year.
That's when they were all laid down. All of those things were laid down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, based on what we've just said in the last couple of minutes, 1951 is turning out to be quite a year for sci-fi as well within that genre. But there's a few close seconds. But I think the sci-fi as a film genre was really solidified. I think in that time, and you would be hard pressed to exhaust all of the films. This one, obviously, a B grade one. I'd be interested to know how this was received in the day.
People would have been disappointed just looking at the posters and then seeing a completely different film.
You think it was like a B grade, a sort of a lesser thing?
It's filmed in 5 days, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I think people can tell.
Yeah, especially when you hold it up to Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything before we leave, gentlemen? Anything cooking in the social sphere, Dan?
Just to catch us on YouTube, check us out on Twitter, Voyage of the Geek on Twitter. Catch us out on YouTube,
Twitch.
Voyage of the Geek.
We live stream to Twitch,
We live stream to
YouTube,
Twitch.
Twitter, and Facebook. Not
Yep.
Twitter. Facebook, YouTube, Twitch.
Yep.
And you can also download the podcast, which is not visual, but from Stitcher and from
iTunes.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, tell us
Fantastic.
what you think.
That's it for another week. Until next time, it's bye for me.
Bye-bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.